So the purpose of this exercise is really to talk about how social media can be leveraged in an e-learning context. Okay? So what I'm going to be doing in the first instance is what the purpose of this exercise is to provide you a frame of reference for you to map your own perspectives against. And also provide insights on how social media can be leveraged to enable you, who are authors. All of you create content, and we know that to be a fact because you completed MAML. And that's pretty much what you were doing for 2 years or so, creating content. Some of you have already published your content. Some of you probably have archived it thinking that, yeah, maybe I can monetize this or get some money from it sometime in the future. So I'm going to be addressing something like that. Specifically, I'm going to be taking more of a business development perspective on it. So I look at e-learning from maybe from a buyer's perspective. Most times when you go to institutions, you go to seminars, you go to all of these different areas where you're looking for insights or knowledge. And usually what happens is people try to sell their content to you. The purpose of social media is actually somewhat different and turns that notion on its head. Largely because what you're trying to do is you're trying to meet the buyer in the place where they are searching for a specific piece of knowledge. Buyers today, because of internet tools and social media resources, enable everybody to have access to the best possible information and knowledge and insights that otherwise would have only been found in institutions like this university here or through quite expensive programs. So what I'm going to be talking about specifically is how you can get your content found. How do you engage the people who are seeking your type of content? How you actually potentially can deliver content in a low-cost, non-traditional manner. And perhaps how you might want to commercialize some of your content. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. The process I'm going to go through is to outline the business context within which social media and e-learning exists as it relates to this discussion. So I've got to try and narrow my focus quite extensively here because it's a very broad subject. I'm just going to outline some key competence or key concepts accompanied by a facilitation. This is my contrarian over here, Chris. He will facilitate some of the discussion, hopefully. So it's not intended really to be a lecture. It's more, hopefully, more akin to an experiential learning experience. It's a double statement, isn't it? Illustrate how certain social media resources contribute to sell content. For example, we've got words, pictures, video, dialogue, feedback, and engagement. So we're going to talk about that as well. Why might you continue to stay awake and stay in this room? Well, hopefully, what you'll get out of this is some insights into ways to get your e-learning content into the marketplace and perhaps get remunerated. If I'm in Australia, where I come from, where I live and work, that's dollars. In the UK, it's typically pounds. Tomorrow I'll be in Ireland meeting my family, it's euros. So how can you get your content monetized and you get a revenue and a return on all the effort and investment you made compiling it over perhaps maybe a MAML course or subsequent to that or prior to it. Insights and approaches around front-loading your value add. The thing about social media and e-learning is you've got to give something away first to get something back. The thing you're looking back to receive back is people's engagement with you. What you have to do is give authentic value add up front. And I'll talk a little bit about how that works. And finally, learn social media sequences that enable you to get found, have your content, if you like, engage, and hopefully get paid for it. You won't always get paid for it, and it's how you actually do it which often determines your remuneration. So, I'm going to talk in terms of trying to narrow the focus very quickly around the business challenge that it relates to this discussion. A notion I call the Cloud Business Exchange. That's another fancy way I concocted, and everybody's got their own version of this, I'm sure, about to describe social media in a business context. So I call it the Cloud Business Exchange because we're now operating in a global environment. I've got a notion here called the new e-learning. And really what that's about is not nothing new really, to be honest with you, but where a new focus needs to be for people who are looking in the first instance to get their content out there, and secondly, to enable people to engage with them. And we'll have a brief discussion. So that's where we're going. This idea here, the key in terms of leadership challenge, I'm now going to try and focus. Typically, when you're looking for outcomes, it's going to be in terms of output, which is kind of tactical, outcomes, and discernment. And really, what I'm trying to do here is saying these are the challenges most people in a business context are trying to deal with, whether it's currently transformation, whether it's optimization of resources, getting alignment between business, technology, people, etc., and how to increase people's productivity or the enterprise productivity. So, generally speaking, in a business context, e-learning is doing something around this area here. What also happens when we talk about Judy's, did I see Judy there somewhere? Oh, there she is, yes. Sustainability, really, sustainability and discernment, to my mind, are they coexist. Because most focus has been on output, which is like tactical. I see MAML really around this space here in terms of a learning experience. But in business, most of the time people are saying, how can we come up with strategies to enable us, in the first instance, if you're commercial, to get competitive advantage, or if you're in a government environment, how can we optimize resources and get the best return on the taxpayer's dollar or pound or euro. So that's what I'm now trying to do, is narrow the focus here. And to narrow it a little bit tighter, what I'm going to be talking about really is people performance. Okay, resources that are available. So when you think about transformation, alignment, productivity in the business context, this is sort of a model that my consultancy promotes as a way to articulate the key areas of business. So in a learning context, what we're trying to do in most cases is to enable new employees to become onboarded or up to speed and productive individuals as quickly as possible. We also use learning to increase the potency of our strategies and hopefully to allow us to become more innovative. Clearly, the MAML program is leading edge in terms of innovation as it relates to management, learning, and leadership. Why do we know that? Because recently, Harvard Business School have said that their traditional approach, which is case-based, they're moving away from that more into, what are they calling it? Experiential learning. Something that we've been talking about here for what, 30 years, I think? Okay, so finally Harvard has picked up. So while I joined up with MAML, I was looking for something innovative, something that was not the traditional run-of-the-mill. Hence, I got that. So the other reason why we use learning is to upskill and help people to adapt and to improve our processes and procedures to map against the changing environment within which we work, whether it's commercial, social, education, whatever it might be. However, and here's what's going on. The first three areas are what I would describe are probably traditional e-learning type environments where you've got formal study, for example, MAML, or you get a degree or whatever it might be. Face-to-face classes, this could be in a business context. A new piece of technology comes out and you need to get people up to speed quickly, so you facilitate classes or programs. Something I did with British Telecom Global Services, what we needed to do was to transition our technical people from tactical, transactional type mindsets to more of a business solve the problem mindset, and to have dialogue around business acumen issues as opposed to technology issues. So what we did there, we facilitated face-to-face type classes. Also, you have briefings and updates. That's becoming much more accelerated today. Why? Because the marketplace is changing rapidly. Typically, you might have had a product or a solution that enables you to be competitive and profitable for a period of maybe 3, 5, even 10 years. That's no longer the case. You look at Apple, who's a leading player. They're constantly innovating and changing. So, if you look at the Apple stores where they have probably a ratio of maybe 1.2 to 1 customers, 1.2 assistants or trainers, if you like, to 1 customer, they're constantly innovating, they're constantly changing because they have to stay ahead of the market. There's a number of different laws like Moore's Law and these other laws and technology that validate all of this. However, the real issue now is most people are finding the fast pace of change is no longer served by traditional e-learning type methods, whether even they're internal. Why is that? Because with the advent of social media like Twitter, with YouTube, and a number of others, Facebook, blogging, some we talked about in the earlier discussion. Most people now are focusing on blogging type solutions such as WordPress and all the different plugins that go with that. So it's a plugin for everything. You can get now a wonderful plugin for $7 that will allow you to monetize your content. You might have an ebook, and you can maybe charge $3 for access to that ebook for 3 days, $5 for a week, or maybe even $15 for a monthly membership. So everything is on demand, which goes back to this point here, JIT, e-learning. Just-in-time learning. Where that actually came, in fact, my very first week in MAML was painful for me, because I was caught in a scenario where within BT, and did I say BT? Well, that company I used to work for, great company, but really not an awful lot of innovation going on in certain quarters. Unfortunately, not the case with the entire company. Really good company. But what happened was, when I joined up with MAML, I had this deliverable to provide solutions for an induction program where the individuals needed to be able to get access to key information within 30 seconds. And they could not travel more than 30 minutes. And it should also take them less than 30 minutes to get access to this information, download it perhaps, or at least go through an e-learning program. So that was the whole notion behind this just-in-time learning. We're now getting just-in-time learning not just from resources like the MAML website, we're not just getting it from other commercial websites, but we're actually concocting it ourselves, we're bringing it to bear ourselves. We're doing it at a peer-to-peer level, and we're doing it at a global level. So, the Cloud Business Exchange, what does that look like? If you look at some of the technology, it's pretty much technology. We've got, as you said in the earlier slide, we've got business development, people performance, business optimization, and technology enablers as the four primary areas that are used to leverage workforce productivity, transformation, optimization, and also how do we make sure that we are competitive and also profitable as a business. So, what people are now using, they're using YouTube, they're using Twitter. One little interesting point was Schumpeter, if you're familiar with, and I'll talk about him before, an Austrian psychologist, economist, and psychologist, one of the interesting characters of the last century, who basically identified this whole notion of waves of innovation, and I'll talk about that in another slide very briefly. But his comment was, capitalism is a perpetual cycle of destroying old, less effective businesses and ideas and replacing them with new, more efficient ones. Right now, today, as I'm talking, my presentation is probably obsolete relative to some piece of innovation that's going on in Apple or somewhere out there in Japan or Korea or in India or even in Himalaya somewhere. Someone's dreamt something up to improve the productivity of other people or to give someone a competitive advantage. For example, a competitive advantage. This gentleman here, a lot of people suggested one of the reasons why he got into his role was he used social media, primarily Twitter, for two reasons: to get his point out, but also to get money in. So a lot of his donations were used. A lot of his donation was a result of his use of Twitter and other social media. This lady here, does anybody recognize this lady?
Yeah.
Okay. Probably in terms of YouTube, I think it's like, I can't remember what the last count is, probably 40 million, 50 million, 60 million hits. One of the critical reasons why she had such an early trajectory was because of a movie star. And does anybody know who that might have been, who was a main promoter of Susan Boyle up front? Does anyone remember a movie called Ghost? Does anybody remember who the leading actress was, or female actor? Demi Moore. Demi Moore latched onto this, and she had a Twitter following of nearly 1 million. And because she put her endorsement on it, Susan Boyle, only in that context, not in the TV context, where she actually performed, but purely in a social media context, that was a tipping point. Demi Moore was a tipping point for her viral videos going out there. So she has instant credibility. I bought all her albums. I think she's wonderful. She's an inspiration to me personally. And sometimes I'm man enough to admit that tears still come to mine and come to eye anytime I see that particular performance when she walked out on stage. It's massive. She would never have got that exposure 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So social media actually accelerated what actually happened on TV. So what everyone's looking at is this whole little notion here. Does anybody know where that comes from? Facebook. Anybody got a Facebook page? Anybody got a Twitter account? Anybody got a YouTube channel? Yeah. It's all pervasive, isn't it? So if we're using that, how are we leveraging it? Are we passive or are we active? Are we proactive or reactive? Something to think about. There's another one here. Has anyone come across this particular organization? And anybody? Anybody like to volunteer who this organization is? Can anybody pronounce it? It's about pinning. It's about photography. Fastest growing social media site ever. Most viral ever. You put out your photographs and people pin it and it moves around. People are now leveraging Pinterest as a way of getting your content out there in front of people, because someone will say, here's a photograph I saw in an article by Chris, or maybe Vivian has produced something and she's putting in a nice little photograph that she took when she was climbing the Himalayas. Right? And so what a wonderful view. But the thing is that when she was climbing the Himalayas, she also wrote a lovely piece on experiential learning. And so that gets tagged, that gets moved around. And I'll show you actually what happens when something like that occurs. The Himalayas.